Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. oh man, that's been a minute since said that. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. I appreciate everybody for understanding and allowing me the time off that I needed. I did not record an episode to let everybody know that I was going to be taking time off. I let it be known on Twitter, but I know that not everybody is on Twitter, and I apologize. But yeah, it's been 2 weeks since I've recorded for the Utah Blockcast, and I apologize, but I needed some time off. Was dealing with a lot. The last month was just an insane month of just nonstop work. So needed to take some time away. First and foremost, to recover from some ailments I was dealing with. You can probably still tell, I'm still dealing with some lingering effects. I'm probably operating at like 92%. I just, I'm mostly good, just not 100, not all the way back to 100 just yet, but getting close. And the time off definitely helped. Came at a good time, and again, I also got to spend time with Miles, which I missed out on because Kyle Whittingham decided to accept the job the day after Christmas. So I missed a lot of time playing with new toys with Miles and all that sort of stuff. Got to spend time with Kendra as well, which was much needed. So took some time away, but obviously needed to get back behind the mic today and just want to share some thoughts. Spent some time getting ready for the next couple of weeks with the podcast. I'm excited to get Bennett back on, excited to get Andrew Crowley back on and talk football, talk basketball. But I needed to get behind the mic to share some thoughts on Utah basketball, Utah football. And obviously need to start with the big topic today. It is Tuesday, January 20th, the day after the national championship game where Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers went 16-0, knocking off Miami 27-21 to win the national championship. And that is significant, to say the least. The losingest program in college football history just went 16-0 in the transfer portal NIL era. And it's not like Indiana was suddenly, flushed with cash. This is a program that, very similar to Utah, has resources, or at least had resources similar to Utah. Obviously going to have quite a few more resources now moving forward, which will change the conversation a little bit for Indiana. But what Cignetti and Indiana was able to do, going 16-0 and doing so with the roster that they had, I think is going to change the conversation rather significantly, right? We've seen over the last 20 years or so that a handful of programs have dominated at the top of the sport, right? The programs that have been able to hoard all of the blue chip talent, the Alabamas, the Georgias, Ohio States, LSU, Clemson, those programs have dominated the sport because they've been able to hoard, a lot of the talent and collect the 4 and 5 star guys on the roster and keep them in place for multiple seasons. And what we've seen over the last couple of years now is the transfer portal and the NIL has sort of leveled the playing field a little bit. Those programs are still at the top in terms of their ability to recruit. But with Cignetti and the methodology that he brought to roster construction, you go to 24/7 Sports and they have this measurement team talent composite, and it's a reflection of the talent that you've brought into your program, right? You see Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, you see those programs at the top of the list, right? Those programs have dominated recruiting over the last couple of years, and they've got a lot of talent. You got to scroll a ways. You got to get to the 20s and 30s. You got to get through the 40s and 50s. You got to get all the way to the 70s to find Indiana in the team talent composite rating. And that does a lot. That changes a lot. It's like Billy Beane and the Oakland A's actually winning the World Series. That's what this is, right? Cignetti brought new mindset to roster construction and valuing production over potential, right? You look at, his roster. I think he has 5 blue chip prospects on his roster, 5 guys that came out of high school rated a 4 or 5 star. That that has completely shut down the blue chip ratio conversation, where you need a certain threshold of talent, of blue chip talent, in order to compete for a national title. And it's not like they got a lucky draw in the playoff. They had to beat, Miami in the national championship game. They had to beat Oregon. They had to go through the Big 12 or the Big 10, beating Ohio State for the Big 10 title. To run the table like they did with this roster is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating, because again, it just has opened eyes, and I think sort of opened the conversation when it comes to roster construction, right? With the transfer portal, it's opened up so many more avenues to evaluate and bring in pieces that can contribute to a winning cause. And, Cignetti brought in guys from the FCS level, from the G5, from the P4, all types of levels, from the JUCO ranks, and put together this roster that, again, valued production over potential, valued experience. And I think it's not going to completely change the conversation of college football, right? Talent is still going to do a lot of the heavy lifting in this sport, but it just creates another avenue where people can genuinely buy into what is within the program, right? Players, in terms of the players and the talent within the program. And, bringing this conversation close to home, with Morgan Scalley taking over this Utah football program. We've sort of seen that with the transfer portal, with what they've brought in. We've sort of seen that become, I don't want to say a priority, but a lot of these players that Utah is bringing in are guys that have playing experience, are guys that have played quite a bit of football. And I think that's important to keep in mind when we're talking about transfer portal recruiting. We've seen Utah in the past go after the blue chip guys that were just stuck on the bench, right? Mahmoud Diabate, for example, a near 5-star linebacker at Florida, played minimally, comes to Utah for senior year and really breaks out, has a great senior season. And so we've seen Utah have success with bringing in those former blue chip guys coming out of high school that just weren't able to crack through with their current program, find a new situation, and have success. That's still going to be an important element to Utah's roster construction. But I think valuing production and actual playing experience is going to do a lot for Utah. And we've seen them go pretty hard after that at a couple of key positions where Utah needed to reload, right? Utah lost a lot along the defensive line and in the defensive secondary. And that's where we saw Utah really emphasize experience and actual production, right? Utah went into the portal looking at defensive line, needing to replace John Henry Daly, Logan Fano, Aliki Vamahi, Dallas Vakalahi, and Jonalea Ea. 5 guys that did a lot for Utah this past season. They went into the portal. They found Ethan Day, an edge rusher out of North Texas, who had a pretty solid production. Pretty solid production at North Texas. Lucas Samsula out of Wyoming, again a guy that You go back to that week 3 matchup, did a lot of disrupting against Utah in that game. He played a lot of snaps this season. Jaire Moe out of San Jose State at defensive tackle as well, as a freshman this season, was really, really disruptive. He's a guy that I think a lot of people are excited about because he is disruptive and can get into the backfield and create a lot of havoc. And then in the secondary, you saw it with Elijah Reed, who's played the last 2 seasons for Akron. James Chenault, who started the season for USF, and others. Earl Parker from the JUCO ranks, Nicholas Igwe at defensive end, played at Kilgore Community College as well. They brought in experience at those positions to kind of follow in this sort of new trend of valuing production over potential, but still bringing in guys that they have evaluated. Elijah Reed is a guy that they loved coming out of high school. He committed to Kentucky. He was a guy that they wanted coming out of high school that they really, really liked. And other guys, Isaiah Kemma along the offensive line, another potential guy, right? You love the qualities, 6'3", 310, 315, coming in to compete at center. But you're also bringing in a guy in Cedric Jefferson, started every game for Montana State, which won an FCS championship this season, was pretty solid, protecting the right side of the line. You bring him in to kind of factor into the mix as well. And then you brought in 2 guys that in Braden Pagan and Kyrie Scholes that each actually have experience in this new offense under Kevin McGivern. And I think that was I think that's pretty significant for Utah, right? We remember how beneficial it was for Ryan Davis having the experience in Jason Beck's offense and what it meant with Dampier. Well, now you've got 2 guys, Utah with Pagan spending time under McGivern this past season, and then Scholes spending time with McGivern at San Jose State. Having that familiarity with the offense is going to be really helpful for Utah as they get into spring ball and get to work. So I think that was really significant. And then with Morgan and needing to take over, obviously put into a situation with Morgan with Kyle Whittingham staying down and then taking the Michigan job. It created a lot of havoc, a lot of unforeseen havoc, even coming into the offseason. But Morgan getting his staff in place as quickly as he did was really, really important, because if you remember going back to the Las Vegas Bowl, the reaction show with me and Bennett, we talked a lot about, enjoy this win, enjoy the day, because, there's going to be some rough news ahead, right? We thought that there were going to be 30, 40 players entering the portal. I think it says a lot of the job that Scalley and this staff have done in retaining a lot of players from this past season's roster. And for Scalley to get his staff in place as quickly as he did, it allowed for those coaches to have conversations with players where they knew where they stood, right? Where they had a better understanding of their outlook going into the offseason. And I think that was a big, big piece to retaining a lot of the roster and then getting into the portal and being able to address and attack certain position groups as much as they did. So I think that says a lot. And again, for Utah, getting back to this Indiana conversation, valuing production over potential and bringing in key players at key positions that have that experience, I think is going to be really interesting to see what that leads to as we get into the offseason. Now, obviously, with it being the day after the national championship game, we've seen a lot of the final rankings for the top 25, and for Utah finishing the year ranked 14th validates a lot of what they did this season. But it's important for Utah as they get into the offseason to have that, because it's going to allow them to build momentum. And for Morgan Scalley taking over this offseason, having that attached to the football program is so valuable, right? It's going to allow them. We're already seeing coaches get out on the recruiting trail, making visits to prospects. Finishing the year ranked in the top 25 is going to be super beneficial for them in the message that they have for recruits, right? Being a top 25 program, it's big time, right? You're going to have opportunities to play on a national TV stage. You're going to be playing in important games, games that matter, competing for a college football playoff. All of these things are important for kids to hear, and to have that number 14 ranking to finish this season, and also being included in the way too early top 25 conversation for next season, I think is super valuable for Scalley and this staff in year one together, as the new staff for Utah football. I think it's super valuable for him, and I think will allow this group to really build momentum getting into the offseason. So let's switch gears, because I also want to hit on Utah basketball. Obviously, with me spending time away, taking time off, I missed a really important moment for Utah basketball, and that was getting the first Big 12 win of the Alex Jensen era, getting an 82-79 victory over the TCU Horned Frogs. And this is a game that I think is really, really important for Utah, more so in the big picture. I want to go back to actually the previous Saturday, Utah versus BYU. And Utah basketball, we know the vibe around the program when it comes to the fan base. There's been a lot of apathy that's set in with the fan base and with this program. Expectations are high for Utah basketball. Under Majerus and the few years after that, Utah enjoyed a lot of success in the basketball program, and many years before that as well. There's just a lot of pride when it comes to running Utes basketball. And unfortunately, Utah wasn't able to meet those standards for a lengthy amount of time. And that's what has created this apathy that's set in with the program, and being unable to get to the NCAA tournament consistently, I think just killed the belief and optimism and fandom for a lot of running Utes fans. But what we've seen is that conversation start to change. And I actually want to get back to something I saw from last night's game, Indiana versus Miami. There was a tweet that was posted by somebody. He shared a photo of the first game of Curt Cignetti as head coach at Indiana. And there were maybe 20, 30 people in the stands at the game at kickoff. And to me, I see that, and I see Utah basketball sort of in the same situation. And, for Utah fans this season, it's been sort of an intriguing one, an interesting one. Alex Jensen, there was a lot of excitement for him being named the head coach. He's the guy that this fan base and supporters have long wanted at the helm. Going back to the coaching change, moving off of Kraskowiak, he's the guy that Utah fans and supporters wanted then. So to get him now, Utah fans finally have their guy leading this program. And I think there was a lot of disappointment for how Utah looked, how they played through the first month and a half of the season. But getting into conference play, we've seen this basketball program, we've seen it be competitive to an extent. But going back to BYU versus Utah, we watched this Utah basketball program compete against a team where we know the difference between Utah's payroll and BYU's payroll. It's a significant amount. And to see, Utah basketball make that a really competitive game. It was 81-80 with a few minutes left to go in that game. And then to also see the Huntsman Center be split almost 55-45 red and blue, I think was a bit of a wake-up call for Utah fans, right? And a couple different wake-up calls, right? You watch this running Ute squad stay competitive against a program that has, a lot of talent. And that's encouraging, right? You saw a good product. Obviously, Utah wasn't able to hang tight to the very end, but to have it 81-80 with 3 minutes to go, I think was really, really encouraging. And then two, to see as much blue as Utah fans did in that game, in that arena, I think was also a bit of a wake up call. And we've seen since that game, Utah fans starting to pound the table for fans to show up. And I thought coming into that TCU game, it was probably the best crowd of the season outside of that BYU game. It was probably the best crowd. And we saw the impact that a good crowd can have on this running Utes squad. This group has shown that it's a good offensive squad with Terrence Brown, Don McHenry, Keanu Dawes, those guys doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Utah is pretty efficient offensively, pretty dynamic even. They've got guys in Brown and McHenry that can do some things with the ball in their hands where they can create scoring opportunities for themselves and for others. The offense has created a lot of quality scoring opportunities inside and out. And, you've seen development, you've seen improvement from individuals in terms of their ability to process the game and make good decisions with the ball in their hands. So you've seen development, you've seen improvement, and we saw that sort of play out again, right? We saw the offense get off to a great start in the first half against TCU, and then in the second half, Jamie Dixon and the Horned Frogs, they're a good competitive program. They've played in a lot of competitive big games. They know what it takes to come back. They know what it takes to compete and to get wins like that. And they came back. They took a lead, but we saw the Huntsman crowd sort of willed this running Ute squad to victory down the stretch. Right, Utah was able to do some things offensively. They were able to score in the second half. But we saw this crowd make an impact on the defensive end of the floor. And then, to what it does for the players, right? I'm going to make a comparison to Utah State, but year in and year, there's so much turnover almost year after year with Utah State, where there would be coaching turnover, roster turnover, but year in and year out, Utah State continues to be one of the top contenders in the Mountain West. And the biggest reason for that, in my opinion, is the fan base. The fan base shows up, and what that does for players, what that does for coaches, it injects them with confidence, and confidence both in their own abilities as players, but also confidence as a collective group, creating that buy-in, right? Having confidence and buy-in is so valuable to a coach, and to a program where that, I think, is really what has allowed Utah State to stay among the top contenders in the Mountain West, despite the constant turnover at the head coaching spot. And I think that is the impact that fans can have. And we saw a little bit of that with Utah and TCU. We saw the difference that it made late in that game against TCU, where the fans rallied the group, got behind this group, led them to a couple of defensive stops late in that game, generated some momentum swinging plays as well. And I think that that's just all important. And obviously for Utah, we know what the season is, right? This is Utah isn't expected to be one of the top contenders in the Big 12, but I think we've seen progress, and I think we've seen progress being made in different ways, both in terms of individual play, team play, but then also within the fan base as well. You're seeing, again, more and more fans start to ask and demand and pound the table that Utah fans show up to these games. And I think that that is so important because, I think it's important to keep in mind, Alex Jensen, Wes Wilcox, they're now getting into, they're getting close to what's going to be their second year with the program, right? They now will have a year in the program where they've been able to sort of identify what brand of basketball they want, the culture that they want to have, the personalities that they feel will do well here. They now have a year under their belt where they can go into the offseason and recruit with intent And I think that is going to be a significant difference, and something that I want to dive into more in depth with Andrew Crowley this week is what that can actually look like. And I think for Utah, right, you're not suddenly going to be contending at the top of the conference this season, but I think generating momentum towards the end of the season and allowing that to carry into the offseason, I think is going to be super, super important. So, it's not going to happen overnight. This apathy isn't suddenly going to dissipate overnight, but I hope that Utah fans continue to show up more and more. And I hope that it continues to lead to greater success for Alex Jensen in this group. I think there's enough here where you've got a good, promising core when you start to look ahead to next season, but generating momentum towards the end of the season and then getting into the offseason with that momentum, with a Wilcox and a Jensen that now have a year under their belt in the college ranks, I think is a really promising recipe for what it could lead to next season. So, again, those are my thoughts. Again, I appreciate everybody for giving me the time to spend some time away from the work duties. I appreciate everybody that has supported, has listened, and has remained patient with me, giving me the time to recoup. But yeah, I'm excited for what's to come with the podcast. Excited to get Bennett and Crowley back on here and some other guests as well. But needed to get behind the mic just to kind of get some thoughts off my chest, get back into the groove a little bit. And yeah, so looking forward to the rest of the week. Obviously, Utah tonight taking on Kansas State. They're in Manhattan for this one. I'll have a recap episode for tomorrow, recapping the game and what went right, what went wrong potentially. And then we'll get into the rest of the week with some conversations with some other folks as well. So for myself, for the Utah Blockcast, go ahead, sign off.